Let's talk about the total lunar eclipse coming up on the 3rd of March this year. It's going to be visible across the Americas, the Pacific, Pacific Rim, Australia, New Zealand, and it should provide a load of fantastic opportunities for photographers who enjoy shooting the moon. Of course, the timing and what you're going to see, where you're going to see it in the sky, it will vary based on your location. And that is worth preparing for so that you can plan the best possible photograph. We're going to look at TPE to plan this out, and we're going to look at the new moon simulator, and in particular the lunar eclipse simulator, which will give you a very good idea of exactly what to expect so that you can think through your plan for shooting this event. Let's jump in. Like every astronomical event, a lunar eclipse comes with its own vocabulary. So let's just level set on what some of these terms mean. You're going to hear terms such as the penumbra and the umbra, partial eclipse, penumbral eclipse, total eclipse. So let's just have a little look at what that means. Here's a simplified diagram. It's not to scale. The sun, the earth, and this is the moon here. Lunar eclipses occur when the moon is full, and at this point you can see that the moon is not lying within the shadow cone cast, or cones I should say, cast by the earth. And you can see that because the sun is not a single point light source, it has its own size, that its rays can pass either side of the earth. And what we have here, this larger area, is the penumbral shadow. So that means that if you're in this part of the cone, that part of the sun is blocked by the earth, but not all of it. It's only when you're in the umbral cone, here, this one that finishes out here somewhere, that is when the entire light of the sun is blocked by the earth. And so if I move this slider, this essentially it, oh, let's see if I can do, there we go. You can see the moon moving in and out there. And when it's in this phase here, this is penumbral eclipse. Here, it's in total eclipse, because it's lying within the umbral shadow cone. So again, this is not to scale. We'll see one that is to scale and gives you a very precise view of what you'll see in a moment. When we're moving in and out between the umbral and the penumbral cone, that's the time of partial eclipse. And of course, once you move out of the penumbral shadow, the eclipse is entirely over. Let's just have a quick look at how the moon appears during these different phases. This is an eclipse from 2024, and it shows the moon almost at the start of the partial phase. And that means that it's essentially in the penumbral phase. And you can see that, unless you're looking closely, you might think it's just a regular looking full moon, except for this slightly darkened area here, and that's where it's going to go into the partial eclipse. So the penumbral eclipse is a fairly subtle event. It can be quite a nice thing to photograph, but it's not going to have that wow, I'm looking at an eclipse factor, unless you probably label it as such. So that's a penumbral eclipse. Here's a shot from quite a few years ago in 2010 in Sydney by the Opera House, and this is a partial eclipse. The bright part of the moon is blown out, as you can see there, but still you can also see the darkened side that is in the umbral shadow. So this is that transition from going through the penumbral cone into the umbral cone. That's Earth's shadow cones I'm referring to there. And a couple of things here. The timing of this eclipse is such that the moon is low in the sky. As you can see, we're looking northeastish here, I think, from across Circular Quay. And a couple of things. When the moon is low in the sky, that means it's very easy to juxtapose it against a landmark, a ridgeline, a mountain, peak, summit, building, whatever it might be. And of course, it's also in the twilight sky, which gives you a few other things to think about that we'll talk about. Next, let's have a look at this sequence. This is 2014. This was photographed in Boulder, Colorado. And this is showing a sequence of 5 shots that essentially from the moon going into totality, that's the deepest part of the eclipse, maximum eclipse, and then starting to come out again. And you can see the brightness varies quite a lot as you go through the eclipse. It's not a sort of on-off effect like you get with a total solar eclipse. And finally, another sequence, again, this is from near Boulder. This was in May 2022, I think. And this was photographed at around 10 o'clock at night looking east. And You can sort of see that this is appears to be a somewhat deeper and darker eclipse than that last sequence. Let's just click back and check. And the magnitude of the eclipse will give you a clue as to how deep red the moon might appear during the event. And the larger the magnitude, the deeper the moon moves through the center of the umbral cone, and that's when it gets this darkened effect. But even here you can see it's not entirely centered. There is a brighter part to the limb at all times during the event. Let's look at the first location for this eclipse. I've got the date set to Tuesday the 3rd of March 2026, day of the eclipse. The red pin is down in Hobart in Tasmania. Anywhere on this side of the Pacific is going to get a great view of the eclipse, and it'll be nicely timed for the evening, so no early mornings, no staying up overnight to observe it. I have the clock set here to 7:45. It's right at the start of the penumbral eclipse. And as you can see, the moon is just rising over the horizon at this point, 0.12 degrees above the horizon. And the sun is not quite set. It sets a few minutes later. So this is going to be very low contrast, difficult to see against the horizon. You'll want to check your sightlines and so forth. Allow for haze and cloud on the horizon. Probably going to be tricky to capture right at the moment of moonrise. But let's have a look at what we see here. And if I turn the horizon off, you've got some controls up here in the simulator. Horizon's off, you see two rings. The red ring is the umbral cone that we saw in that geometry diagram earlier in the video, and the yellow is the penumbral cone. So at the start of the penumbral eclipse, that's when the moon's limb crosses within this cone. Let's put the horizon back on, and then I'm going to put this on 300 times real speed, and we'll just watch it play out. So it's rising through the sky, sky's darkening, it's moving into the penumbral cone, as you can see. No major change in appearance, except for, I'll just pause it here. There is a slight darkening on this side of the limb. It's because it has darker features here anyway, as in this particular geometry. But even here, you can probably see that this part of the limb is darker than here. So that's reflecting what we saw in that image of the penumbral eclipse that we looked at earlier on. Let's keep playing. I'll slow it down a little bit so you can get a sense of how this goes. So 1 second equals 1 minute of real time with the speed controls here. So we've moved into the partial eclipse phase, and you can hopefully see that, of course, once you're in the umbral cone, this is much, much, much darker, hard to perceive against the dark sky, because this will appear very bright. The contrast for both the camera and the eye makes it hard to see much at all of what's in the umbral cone, while there's still all of this very bright moon. Even though it's in the penumbra, it's still relatively very bright. And as photographers, one thing that I would strongly encourage you to do is to acquire focus on the moon during the partial phase. You have high contrast edges, which if you're using autofocus, which with modern cameras is perfectly feasible to do, you can pick that up quite easily. Once you're into totality, you don't want to be trying to use autofocus to refocus on the moon, because it's just so dark. It makes it quite hard for the camera and to acquire focus automatically. Even if you were focusing manually, it can be very hard to see what's going on during totality because things become so dark. Let's just play forward and watch what happens here. You can see the time advancing over here on the right. We've got the magnitude, an estimate of the instantaneous magnitude of the eclipse. That's sort of a measure of how much of the moon is within the cone. That's increasing, and it's increasing towards 1. That is when totality starts. Now, as the bright, partially eclipsed portion of the moon becomes smaller, it becomes easier to make out the rest of the moon, and that's when this blood moon color really starts to be perceived by the eye and by the camera. It's not so much that it wasn't there before, it's just with the bright contrast, it's hard for you to make out. Here we are during the total eclipse, and I'm going to pause it here just to show you how these controls work here. U2, like C2 in a total solar eclipse, that's when totality starts, U2, and that's when all of the moon lies within the umbral shadow cone. Maximum eclipse is when it lies deepest within the cone, closest towards the center, if you will. And you can see that this is where you'll get the darkest, deepest, reddest colors. Still a bit brighter as you're getting out towards the edge of the umbral cone. Then at U3, that's when the moon is starting to depart the umbral cone. So let's just go back to max eclipse. I'm going to speed it up for interest of time, and we'll just watch it play out. So watch the magnitude is decreasing here, back to 1. We're into partial, we sort of lose the blood moon effect. Time is advancing over here, and we're coming out into penumbral eclipse. Again, slightly darker here, very subtle, but certainly darker than this brighter limb here. We'll let that play out. And then partial is over, and we're into partial penumbral, if you will. There we go. So this is how you can use the simulator to really get the sense of the timings, the sky conditions, the sky brightness, and the progression of the eclipse for any location you want. Okay, let's try another location. I'm going to expand the map. Come here, we'll have a look at Vancouver. Doesn't need to be exact, but let's imagine we go somewhere here on the waterside. And notice the timings now. This eclipse is happening overnight on the west coast of North America. Just zoom out so you can sort of see where we are there. There we are, Vancouver. And what that means is that, let's say when the partial eclipse starts, the moon is already high in the sky. It's 43 degrees above the horizon. So from a photographic perspective, this probably means it's difficult to juxtapose this against any landmark or any man-made structure. Two things to think about there. It's dark, it's pitch black, so you're not going to get any contrast between, say, a ridgeline of a mountain, that sort of thing. With a man-made building that's illuminated, that's still got the lights on, let's say at 2 in the morning, you might be able to put the moon next to that, but you're going to have to stand relatively close to it because the moon is so high up in the sky, and buildings often don't necessarily photograph at their best when you're too close to them. So you might want to think about a telephoto shot for this eclipse, or a sequence to show the different phases of it. And again, you can use the simulator to get a sense of how that will play out. Let's just click through the contacts and watch what happens here. So that's P1 in Vancouver, U1, start of total, U2, totality, max eclipse, U3, U4. One thing that's interesting, of course, is a couple of things to note. One is that at max eclipse, the moon is no more eclipsed in Vancouver than it was in Australia. That's the same for every observer on Earth. But what is different is where the brighter part of the limb of the moon appears relative to the observer. That's going to depend on your observing location. Again, you can check the altitudes here at different points in the eclipse. If you wanted to do a full sequence, you may want to make a note, I'll just get myself out the way there, of the change in azimuth and altitude across the course of the eclipse. So this is at the start, P1, it's at 190 degrees. Here on the map you can see it just west of due south. And at P4, it's up at 270 degrees, so that's an 80-degree field of view horizontally to capture the whole thing. And it's also notably very close to setting. It's only 5 degrees above the horizon, and the sky is starting to brighten at the end of the eclipse in this location. What you might guess from that, and you would be correct, is that if you come further east, let's say we go to Minneapolis, and we look at the timings here, the moon sets during partial eclipse. and you can just make that out there from the simulator. So we don't see the full eclipse at night at all here. Total eclipse is happening during a twilight sky. That would be visible, but once you're getting into civil twilight, the sky is so bright that it's going to be a very low contrast thing to see at all, and that will be difficult to observe, I think. Oh, that's the end of total eclipse. Yeah, greatest eclipse is there. That'll be okay. That'll be pretty dark in astronomical twilight. So this is a quick view on how you can explore the map, explore your location, check the timings, think about the type of shot you want to do based on the elevation, altitude of the moon in the sky. Think about acquiring focus during the partial phase, and don't try to refocus during totality. I think that's a top tip for getting good shots, sharp pictures during totality. And bear in mind the exposure difference is going to be pretty large between the partial phase and the total phase. So I look forward to seeing what you get from this event, and hope you have clear skies.